Hey everyone, welcome back to Personal Finances for Self-Reliance with me, Ryan Jones. I'm glad you're with me today. We are on week 4, and we're going to spend some time today creating a budget. So that is the lesson part of it. The principal part of it is, learning to live with a balanced life. And so just want to remind everyone what we're doing here. So we're on week 4 of this lesson manual. Hopefully you can see that. But we are going through, as always, on the online version, and you can find it here by going to the churchofjesuschrist.org and going under libraries to the gospel library. From there, you will find life help down here. And then under self-reliance, and we are currently going through the personal finances manual for self-reliance, and we are on week 4. So week 4 here is about creating a budget. So last week we kind of talked about a few things about obedience and fasting, and we talked about paying our tithings and offerings first, and putting those priorities in our life first, and then allows everything else to kind of fit into our life, whether it's time management, as we talked about, or more importantly, what we're talking about here is finances. So really putting those 2 key things first, paying the Lord first and paying yourself first, and then allowing yourself to budget around that. So today we're going to really kind of dive into that. So last week, we continued to track our income expenses. Hopefully you had the opportunity to practice your tithing and your fast offerings that we talked about under the foundation principle. Hopefully, maybe or not, time permitted you to have another family council where you talk about tithings or offerings, or at least it's on the list to discuss in your next family council. And hopefully you are taking this journey with somebody, your spouse or a friend or somebody that you can be accountable to, because you're going to get more out of this lesson, especially as we go in the coming weeks, that if you're working with somebody and at least having a conversation with somebody on a regular basis. So I continue to ask these questions. How is it going with your, counseling with the Lord? Are you doing your scripture studies? Are you saying your prayers? As you're on this journey of personal finance and self-reliance, I hope that you're allowing the Lord into your life, as we talked about last week, and some of the benefits of being obedient and opening the windows of heaven, but more importantly, that you're having that communication, that you're having that discussion. Hopefully you're continuing to get some enlightenment by tracking your income and your expenses. What are you learning about yourself? Where are those priorities that you're spending your money on? And going from there. So let's dive into today. Now, today's lesson overall from a recording standpoint should be much shorter than we've done in the past. However, hopefully you pause it. If we were in a classroom instruction, which is what this is designed for, we would work on our budget, and we would pause and really work on our budget. So hopefully you take time to pause and do the steps as I'm teaching them today, and that you're prepared, you have a notebook, you have your laptop or computer, whatever you're going to do. So one of the things we want to talk about today in the foundational part of the lessons and teachings is the principle of having a balanced life. And we're going to start off with a video here. Hopefully this works this time and I don't have to go read it to you again. I think it's so much better when I don't have to read it to you like we did last week. So think about this question. How do I keep the daily demands of life in balance? How do I find balance in my life?
Isn't it true that we often get so busy? And sad to say, we often even wear our busyness as a badge of honor, as though being busy by itself was an accomplishment or a sign of a superior life. Is it? I think of our Lord and exemplar, Jesus Christ, and his short life among the people of Galilee and Jerusalem. I've tried to imagine him bustling between meetings or multitasking to get a list of urgent things accomplished. I can't see it. Instead, I see the compassionate and caring Son of God purposefully living each day. When he interacted with those around him, they felt important and loved. He knew the infinite value of the people he met. He blessed them, ministered to them. He lifted them up, healed them. He gave them the precious gift of his time.
I think this is powerful. I think when we really digest of this whole talk that he did, not just this little piece of it, that we really think about, what did the Savior do to achieve balance in his life? And I think sometimes this is really hard for us to relate with. We have a job, we have money, we have kids. Everybody has different situations, what's going on. You may be going to school, all different kind of aspects of life. But I think the principle here is that be in the moment. I think sometimes we often think that we're already thinking about the next 3 things we got to do or we got to get done. And think about being in the moment with your kids, being in the moment with your spouse. And I'm guilty of this. It's something I have to consciously work on. I do live a busy life, and I try my best to be in the moment. Put your phone down. There's always going to be more emails to read. One of the things I learned in my career early on was there's always going to be work tomorrow. I could stay and work all night and there'd still be work tomorrow. And so being able to set those boundaries in your life and be able to have balance and know how to let things go. And it's going to be there when you pick up your phone 20 minutes from now or 15 minutes from now or an hour from now. Be in the moment, be in the present of where you're at, giving focus and energy. In Mosiah chapter 4, verse 27, we read, "See that all things are done in wisdom and order, for it is not requisite that a man should run faster than he has strength." So again, keep some boundaries. Know how fast you can run. Sometimes it's important to stretch and to grow ourselves, but I think it's important too to find that balance. In 2 Nephi chapter 9, verse 51, "Do not spend money for that which is of no worth, nor your labor for that which cannot satisfy." And I think we talked about this last week when I did the jars and the rocks. I think when we start to think about what are those priorities, what are those most important things that we're paying attention to and that we're giving our focus to, and we're finding the balance in our lives, I think there's always more that we can do. The question is it worth it? Is what those other things doing worth it? Russell Ballard says, "Just do the very best you can each day. Do the basic things, and before you realize it, your life will be full of spiritual understanding that will confirm to you that your Heavenly Father loves you. When a person knows this, then life will be full of purpose and meaning, making balance easier to maintain." I know this in my life. I know that when I accept a calling, and I sometimes wonder, how am I going to do this calling? How am I going to make it work? It just works. When you put the right priority, you put the right focus, you manage those biggest priorities first in your life. If marriage is important to you, you're going to make it a priority. You're going to make it a priority to spend time with your spouse. If your kids are important to you, you're going to make time for those kids. It just is that important that when you put those priorities and you find balance in your life, you'll be able to not multitask and be in the moment, be in the present. James E. Faust says, "Balance in large measure is knowing the things that can be changed, putting them in proper perspective, and recognizing the things that will not change." right? And that's just powerful. I think sometimes this is one of those things that we need to ponder. And this is really a good talk. I remember this talk. It's been 22 years ago. It's crazy how time flies. But I do remember this talk and the need for balance in our lives. So hopefully you might go back and reread that whole talk. But what things can be simplified or eliminated from our lives so we can experience more joy? And I think that's important because it by asking this question, it makes you reflect on what is joyful to you, right? What is joy? And so I think sometimes we need to understand what gives us joy, what brings us joy. And maybe that's spending time with a spouse or family or kids, or maybe it's an activity that you like to do that brings you joy. Hiking or biking or playing tennis or pickleball these days, right? What is it that gives you joy, and how do you simplify your life so that you can have that peace and that joy in your life? So on page 55 is a quote from Dallin H. Oaks. I'm going to jump down to it here on the virtual side. There's two of them here. Many breadwinners worry that their occupations leave too little time for their families. However, I have never known a man who looked back in his life and said, I just didn't spend enough time with my job. I think the point there is there's always seems to be a regret we didn't spend enough time with our family. So somehow making priority for your family and your kids and your spouse is something that you need to do before you lose them, before the kids move out of the house. The time is limited with kids in your house. And sadly, some people, before it's too late, sometimes lose a spouse to death or to divorce. And you don't realize that how good you had it before you lost it. And so I think sometimes we need to be mindful of that. The other quote here is the number of good things we can do far exceeds the time available to accomplish them. Some things are better than good, and these are the things that should command priority attention in our lives. And I remember a talk not too long ago as well. Actually, maybe it's a little longer than I think it is now with time flying. But think of, if you look back, there's a talk called Good, Better, and Best. And I think it's so true. We spend a lot of time with good things. They are good things. But there's better things and there's even best things that we can spend our time with. And so the first activity for you to do is to pause and think about, if you were to imagine you are 25 years older and you're still living the same way, complete these two statements below in your life. I just didn't spend enough time doing blank. I spend too much time doing blank. I think asking ourselves this on a monthly, weekly, yearly basis helps us reshape and to think about balance in our lives. These are two of the foundational questions. As a business leader, oftentimes I will spend time with people who are on my team that I'm coaching or mentoring, and I'll ask them, what do you wish you were doing more of? And what are some of the things that you wish you were doing less of? And how do you delegate, or how do you assign out some of those responsibilities that may be taking some of your time that would enable you to spend more time doing some of the things that you want to do? And so sometimes you have in your control of things that you're willing to give up, let go of, and maybe assign to somebody else, or to give that responsibility to somebody else so that you can do those. And then step 3 of this activity is to avoid future regrets. Write 1 or 2 things you can do to bring more balance in your life. And I would challenge you to act on those. Don't just write them down. Strongly ponder them, think about them, and act right here on your commitment. Act on your ideas to bring more balance in your life. What were you just inspired to do as you heard these quotes from President Oaks? And listen to my words. What can you go do? What can you act on? What were you inspired by the Holy Ghost to go do and bring balance in your life? And I encourage you to share that message, share those thoughts with somebody, because you're more committed to do them when you share them. So let's dive into the meat of the lesson. And I think the foundational principles of the lessons are equally as important. But today we're gonna spend 45 minutes on a budget. Now the recording will not be 45 minutes. We're probably only going to go another 10 or 15 minutes at the most from a recording standpoint. But I hope you're prepared to really think about and put together a budget. I think this is so important. If the rest of these chapters, if you don't do a budget, you're going to struggle, because the whole point is by the time we get to the 12 weeks, you've done this budget at least once and hopefully twice, and maybe even a third time. And I guarantee you by the third month, you'll start to really have this budget thing figured out. It really does take you 2 or 3 months to get a good budget that works for you and your family and can and make it part of your routine and your habit. So if we look at our picture, as we always do, budget is one of the walls. So in order for things to stay in our house, to be protected, if we want these things to work, we obviously have work we've already talked about, and now we're going to build the other wall of budget. So today is budgeting. So let's dive into it and ponder this question a little bit. Why do you think the budget is a wall and not like a layer inside your financial stewardship success map? And so I think this is really worth saying, because I think it's a structural piece. All the other things you'll see in the layers, when you think about these layers, they become possible because you're managing your money. You're telling your money where to go. You're telling your money that you want to pay tithing and offering. You're telling your money that you want to eliminate your debt. You're telling your money that you want to save and invest for your future. You're telling your money that you want to be able to have enough to give and bless others, right? And so I think all of this comes from having a structure and a mindset of telling your money where to go. You're telling your money how to build these layers by having a budget. So let's read a little bit. So today we will discuss one of the most vital tools for building financial security and becoming self-reliant: creating and effectively using a budget. A budget is a plan. Using a budget, you plan how you will use your money for a certain period of time. Following a budget will help you and your family take control of your temporal life and put off the natural man and invite the spirit into your home. Budgeting can also help you protect your family from hardships, as you use it to allocate money for building an emergency fund, paying down your debt, and saving for your future. As we just talked about, those layers of our success house map. Creating and following a budget is an act of faith. We cannot predict the future. The costs often arise unexpectedly. It's important to remember that a budget must be flexible, continually adjusted and improved, especially week after week or month over month. Sorry, that was my insert. When you create a budget this week, remember that it will need to be consistently reviewed, revised during your regular family councils. If you go over budget, don't give up. It takes several months of adjustments before you have an effective budget. And I'll just testify to that. I would say 3. The magic number is 3. One whole quarter of the year that you live and try to manipulate a budget. And every month's going to be different. There's different expenses that need to be made a month. School expenses, or seasonal things, Christmas, holidays, birthdays. Every month has its little ups and downs. And so you can't just write this budget and say, I'm going to live on this budget every month for this year. It just doesn't work that way. It's a living, breathing document, and we'll talk about that. So I want you to take a minute, pause the video, and go back and read what we just read. What are some of the things that you understand and believe that some of the blessings of using a budget? There were some key words in there that emphasize the budgets. And I'll testify that I know that those are true. I live a budget. I work with people to get on a budget and live on a budget. And I just truly know that there are blessings when you come to live on a budget. And the number one is stress. When you agree with your spouse or your accountability partner and you build a budget, when things happen, you kind of already have planned for it. You adjust. You know that, oh, I can take money from this category and because I didn't think of this month or whatever, where we're just not going to be able to go out one more time this month because this other expense came up. It makes it easy to kind of move the budget around because you will want a balanced budget, and we'll get into that. So if you haven't already, pause the video, come back up here and read what we wrote, and circle or maybe even your own impressions of some of the things that you will receive by living and working on a budget. So let's get into building a budget. And we're gonna do this as the manual does. I have some tricks and whatnot that I will try to add to the manual as we go here. So in the following activities, we will practice creating a budget. So for today, you will estimate the ask for amounts based on what you know and what you've learned from tracking your income and expenses for the last 3 weeks. So for the last 3 weeks, almost a month, you've been tracking your income and expenses. So hopefully you have a pretty good idea of some of these things that we're going to talk about today. One of your commitments this week will be to repeat this exercise with real numbers using the table on the end of the chapter. So what it's telling you is that you might just do some estimating today, but you will want to go and really make this true to your money. And we have some example money here to do. So we're going to start with your income. So the first thing you want to do, and what we're going to do is we're going to reference this form. So it's on page 60 of your book. You can also do this in like a spreadsheet, and I will show you a spreadsheet here in just a minute on my computer. And but this is what we're going to do, and we're going to start with an income. So estimate what your net income is. So this is what you actually bring home. So you may be contributing to a 401k or your taxes. It may be pulling out some of your health insurance. What we want to talk about is the budget for you is the money that comes home to you that ends up in your account. So when you get that direct deposit or you get that check, that is your net income. All those other expenses have kind of already been paid. We'll talk about some of those other expenses, some of your insurance and some of your 401k and investing in some later lessons. But when it comes to budgeting, what we want to do is budget the money that you're receiving. So the net income of what you're going to take home. Does that make sense? So we're focusing on your net. The next step into creating a budget is to classify and estimate your expenses. You've been tracking your expenses and placing them in the categories that you created in chapter 1. So you remember some of those categories that we created. And now you're going to split them into two types, fixed and variable. And we'll explain what the word fixed means and what the word variable means. So the exercise we're going to do here in a minute is put these categories that you've been tracking into either fixed or variable. And a fixed expenses are for a definite amount and do not change it. Sorry, for a definite amount, right? And so these are fixed, right? So your rent is $500 every month. You're going to pay $500 every month for your rent. So those are examples. Most of these expenses will be monthly, and there may be some that occur more or less frequently. Fixed expenses cannot directly be controlled by a spending habit. Instead, these are fixed. They are not changed. They are controlled by you maybe changing the situation or switching service providers, right? So a good way to identify a fixed expense is to ask, does this expense occur regularly, and is the expense the same amount each month? It's that simple. If it's the same amount every month, it's fixed. Common examples are mortgage, rent, car payments, certain expenses like internet, cable, and cell phone bills will be the same every month. There are also fixed expenses that aren't necessarily monthly. Sometimes expenses occur annually or semi-annually or quarterly. For example, if you pay a car insurance every 6 months or life insurance every 12 months, this is also a fixed expense. And to convert this fixed expense to fit your budget, you divide the amount you pay. Sorry, 1 second. To convert this fixed expense to fit your budget, divide the amount you pay by the number of months between the payments. While you may not pay this bill every month, you will need to set aside the money in proportion every month so you can pay the bill. This is really important. This is where a lot of times people really don't execute their budget very accurately. And what I mean by that is sometimes people will try to fit a variable or a changing bill that only happens like every other month or every 6 months. They'll just try to fit it into their budget every 6 months. So if I got to pay $500 every 6 months for insurance, that budget in that month is going to be really tight because I got to squeeze out $500. But if I can squeeze out, $90 every month and set it aside, when that 6 month comes, that money has been set aside for that, and it just goes right into budget. So this is the number one area that people who don't budget are constantly chasing their tail, because every month there's like this weird expense that only happens annually or every other month or some cycle like that they're not accounting for. And so they get these big kind of what I call waves in their budget where it's like, oh man, we ran out of money this month. Whoa, we had to pay those subscriptions. Well, this month we had a lot more money. Instead of saving that money, we spend it, right? And so you're getting these weird tidal waves of cycles. So spend 10 minutes, right? So pause this video. I hope you're doing this as we're doing it. I will pause about 30 seconds of silence, but I hope you pause the video and do this and write your fixed expenses in the sample budget on the next page. Write an F to those type and estimate the amount. So what you're going to start to do is build this sheet similar to what you see on the screen. So you're going to start to put in those fixed expenses, and we'll talk about the variable ones here in just a minute. Now notice here on this insurance, there's a good chance this insurance, this $80, is probably due every 6 months. So they've factored in that insurance, if they set aside $80 every month, when that insurance is due in 6 months, they'll have the money to do that. So again, so you'll want to think about this for you. So, all right, hopefully you paused the video. We're coming back, and you now have your fixed expenses and your income on your budget sheet. So now let's talk just a minute about variable expenses. So variable expenses are not the same amount every month. There's some variable expenses that are not directly controlled by your spending habits. For example, your utility bills. So sometimes your water bill, your gas bill, electric are variable. They fluctuate, and they're based on the usage. So your water bill may be higher in the summer if you have a yard that you're watering or otherwise. And electric may be higher in the summer when you're trying to do your air conditioning, or depending on what part of the world you live in, right? It's just things are going to fluctuate based on usage. Sometimes your cell phone bill is based on usage, so that can be flexible. However, even though the monthly amount may vary, you still have to budget for these on a monthly basis. Now, there are some variable expenses too. That in my area, our water bill comes every other month. So it's a variable expense, but it also isn't coming every month. So we've had to find ways to kind of budget for that and make that work in our family's budget. When it comes to budgeting, the most important variable expenses are the ones you have the most control over. These are directly controlled by your spending habits. A good way to identify many of these expenses is to ask, do I buy this from a store or online? For many variable expenses, you can make the choices to spend more or less in these categories. Examples include groceries, fuel, eating out, cell phones, entertainment, those kind of categories. So pause the video, spend 10 minutes, and now get your variable expenses on there. Now, if you're doing a variable expense, the idea that you've been tracking your expenses, you can start to maybe get an idea of what those estimates might be. Now, this is really important because when we get to the end of this section, your budget needs to balance, meaning the income minus all of your expenses needs to equal zero. Every line needs $1. Now, hopefully you've added tithing and savings to your budget, right? So remember, we want to do those first. So some of those first two lines should be hopefully your tithings and your savings or your emergency fund, however you want to label it, or your future investments, right? So pause the video and do this next section. All right, welcome back. So at this point, you should have something similar to the manual here. So you have your income, and this estimate should be for you and what your income is, and your expenses categorized based on fixed and variable, and we should have a zero-based budget, okay? And this is where you got to pull the strings. You got to get to zero, right? So you got to adjust your entertainment. You might increase or decrease your groceries or food or dining out. And your categories are unique to your categories. This is just a sample so you understand the idea of what we're doing here. So let's talk a little bit. As you put together your budget, you may find that you have more expenses than income. If this is your situation, you are not alone. Most people find this to be true. And this is a problem you can solve. There are two ways to fix this challenge: earn more income or spend less money. That's it. For now, let's discuss how we use a budget to help us spend less by learning how to control how much we spend on our wants. Right now, if your income is less than your needs, those bare essentials of things, I would encourage you to go talk with your bishop. Go talk with your bishop and figure out what he can do as a spiritual leader and guider in your life that you can make ends meet for your needs. Now, again, wants are a whole nother category, right? It's hard for somebody to want to help you when you're spending $150 a month on a cable bill for entertainment TV, right? So, and you might think, oh, that's a need. And truly, the TV is a want, and it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, but when money's tight, you got to be really careful of what our needs and what our wants. So let's watch this video. I think this is one of Uchtdorf. I believe it's Uchtdorf, if I remember right. But yes, this is a great lesson on wants and needs.
In the 1960s, a professor at Stanford University began a modest experiment testing the willpower of 4-year-old children. He placed before them a large marshmallow and then told them they could eat it right away, or if they waited for 15 minutes or so, they could have 2 marshmallows. He then left the children alone and watched what happened behind a two-way mirror. Some of the children ate the marshmallow immediately. Some could wait only a few minutes before giving in to temptation. Only 30% were able to wait. What started as a simple experiment with children and marshmallows became a landmark study suggesting that the ability to wait, to be patient, was a key character trait that might predict later success in life. I remember when I was preparing to be trained as a fighter pilot, we spent a great deal of our preliminary military training in physical exercise. We ran and we ran and we ran some more. I began to notice something that frankly troubled me. Time and again, I was being passed by men who smoked, drank, and did all manner of things that were contrary to the gospel and in particular to the word of wisdom. I remember thinking, wait a minute, aren't I supposed to be able to run and not be weary? I asked myself, was the promise true or was it not? The answer didn't come immediately, but eventually I learned that God's promises are not always fulfilled as quickly or in the way we might hope. Patience means staying with something until the end. It means delaying immediate gratification for future blessings. The work of patience boils down to this: keep the commandments. Trust in God, our Heavenly Father. Serve Him with meekness and Christ-like love. Exercise faith and hope in the Savior. And never give up.
I love that lesson. I think we all have those inner children in us that we can't wait. I think society, if you think about how credit cards came to be, I mean, if you think about this, credit cards haven't been around that long. And I mean, time is relative, but, you know, my parents really, it wasn't until they were later in life that they even got their first credit card. You delayed gratification, you saved up, you bought it. And I think we've become a society where we want it now. I want the cell phone now, and I'll pay the payments for the next 2 years or 3 years or whatever. And so I think there's a lot to learn from this lesson about patience and what kind of child are you. And there's an activity here that is basically a fun little activity, and I would tell you to take a few minutes, and it basically says, how do I feel about my spending? And it's just this little mini self-evaluation. I spend too little. I feel good about my spending. I spend too much. And I think as you go through some of these and you think about it, it may give you some inspiration. I would challenge you that as you do it, maybe talk through with your accountability partner or your spouse or somebody and talk about it. Why do you feel that you're not spending enough? Why do you want to spend more? Why do you want to spend less? All of those things are powerful in that. So, as you know, here's a little testimony. And I want to share this with you because I think this is an important question. And I didn't mean for this to go as long as it did, but I'm glad it did. So thanks for sticking with me today. But I want to get to this. It says, my husband gets paid on commission. So one paycheck is never the same as the last one. And sometimes there's a gap between receiving a paycheck at all. We've learned to just go in order, pay the most important bill first, then the next most important. Everyone has to decide what is most important means to them. Now, the manual doesn't go into this in very much detail, so I'm going to take the liberty of sharing my thoughts on this. And I'm going to show you this in a spreadsheet so that you can understand this. So what you're looking at here, hopefully you can see this, and I will make sure in editing that you can see it. What you have here is, this is the exact scenario that you saw on the example in the manual. Now, let's say that I am commissioned and I make somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a month on commission. So what I would tell you to do is look over the last 3 months of and maybe even go to the last 6 months. What was the lowest amount that you made, right? What was the lowest amount that you made? And then budget for that lowest amount. So let's say that my lowest amount was $1,000, just like the example in the spreadsheet in the manual. and we budget this way. But what if I make $2,000 that month? What if I make $1,600 that month? So what I teach people to do here is create this kind of secondary budget of where do you want the money to go? If I get more money, how much do I want to pay towards debt? How much more do I want to add to my grocery budget? How much do I want to add to my entertainment budget or clothes? And the rest of it, maybe I want to put into savings. So let's say this month I got $1,000 plus my commission. I actually got $1,600. So I had $600 more dollars. So then what I do is obviously I want to pay tithing. So I'm going to pay 10%. And maybe I'm going to add some offerings into that. So 65. And then let's says, now we go down. So we look at this balance. There's $535. Well, I wanted to pay $100 more on debt. Can I do that? Yes. Okay, so let me pay $100 more on debt. I wanted to add $100 more to our grocery budget. Perfect. Add $100 more to our grocery budget. I want to add $15 more to our entertainment. And you can make these categories whatever you want and these amount. But when the money hits zero, you stop. So for example, if I only got $200 of bonus, I would only be able to put 65. I would pay my tithing, right? And then I would pay, I could pay $100 to my debt, but then there's only $75 left to my groceries. So I would be at zero, and these others, I would not be able to add any more money. But if I got 600, right? And we did our tithes, and hopefully you're following this. And what I'm comparing is this balance line to what the next budget item is. So $100, $50, $50. And look at that. We made it to the end and we still have $235 that I can add to my savings. I'm going to add it to my savings and we've balanced our budget. So this is what I do with people with an irregular income is you budget what your lowest amount is, and then you create this irregular budget and how much you want and hope that you can put in. Imagine I got $2,000 of extra income. Where would I want that? Maybe I would want to pay, $500 to my debt. Maybe I want $200 more of groceries. Maybe we're going to celebrate my big bonus and we're going to spend, $300 on that and $100 on clothing. And I'm still able to put $1,400 into my savings. Actually, I did that wrong. $1,635 is what's left, right? So again, the manual doesn't really show this. Hopefully this little example helps you. But, I think if you live on an irregular income, budgeting is so much more important. Where you're going to put your money, how you budget it, because you just never know how much you're going to have every month. So the goal here is to continue in the philosophy of family council. I think budgets are a great way to talk about budgets in a family council. How much are you going to allocate in any category? Having the family and the spouses be on the same page, but more importantly, having some of the kids, know that, hey, we're going to do this. We're going to go on this family trip. That means we're only going to have this much in our dining out. We're not going to be able to go out to eat as much or stop for fast food or go out for ice cream or whatever it is, having those part of those discussions. Let's read what Robert D. Hale says. One important way to help our children learn to be provident providers is by establishing a family budget. We should regularly review our family income, savings, and spending plan in a family council meeting. This will teach our children to recognize the difference between wants and needs and to plan ahead for meaningful use of family resources. During your family council this week, work together with your spouse, create the family budget. If you're single or if you'd like additional help, counsel with a friend, parent, family member, mentor, group. Look me up on social media or otherwise. I'd be happy to connect with you and help you. And then down below are some questions and topics that you can use in your family council. So hopefully you commit to talking about the family situation, the family budget in a family council this week. So, as we conclude, we want to end with Doctrine and Covenants 88 verses, section 88 verses verse 119. Organize yourselves, prepare every needful thing. Budgets help you get organized. They help you tell your money where to go versus wondering where your money went. So hopefully there was something meaningful you learned today. Jot that down, take a note of it, and more importantly, what are you going to go do as a result of it? What are you going to change? What are you going to try to do? Hopefully you're going to do a budget. Hopefully you're going to try to live on that budget. And hopefully you don't do this as I did the budget and you will live by the budget. I hope you do it in family council with a spouse, with an accountability partner, that you decide together that this is where the money is going to go. This is how the money is going to be spent. I testify you'll have more peace and more success with a budget when you do things together and you agree to how you're going to budget and where your money is going to go together. So the commitments this week are you're going to practice the My Foundation principle, which was, do you remember? Remember what we talked about? Finding balance in our lives. So finding balance in our life is the foundational principle. So how are you going to find balance in your life? And then you create your budget. Make sure your budget is complete for you. Use real numbers. Sorry about that. And then make sure that you have an open discussion in family council or with your family, even if it's a special session of a family council to talk about the budget. And hopefully you have an action partner that you're contacting and supporting them as well as they may be supporting you. So that's it for week number 4. Thank you for being with us. We had a great time. This recording ended up being a little longer than I thought. I thought it'd be about 30 minutes and 45 minutes. But hopefully you did the exercises and you are well on your way to having a budget. Bye, everyone. See you next week and make it a great day.